6 drunk men slammed their table, cursing loudly. One raised his hand to strike the small woman who'd just stood up. Other diners looked down, too afraid to intervene. The restaurant owner stepped forward, his voice booming across the entire room. Enough! She used to lead special forces. Anyone who touches her will regret it. Sound collapsed. 6 men went silent. The entire restaurant held its breath. Meet Elena Ward, 34 years old. Slender build, long brown hair tied low, simple button-down shirt, gentle but penetrating eyes. Elena had come for dinner with a few female friends, choosing a table against the wall. While waiting for their food, she helped the restaurant staff, picking up a napkin that had fallen to the floor, moving her chair aside to make room for an elderly woman walking by, gently smiling at a crying child at the next table. 6 men at the adjacent table began getting loud, the smell of beer heavy in the air. They started catcalling Elena's group, using crude language. One man knocked over a water glass, soaking one of her friend's dress. Elena stood up calmly. "That's enough. Please stop." The 6 men burst into laughter. "Who do you think you are?" "Sit down, lady. Women don't get to tell us what to do." One man slammed the table, his chair falling backward. He raised his hand, preparing to slap Elena. Other patrons in the restaurant sat in silence, heads down, too afraid to get involved. Elena didn't flinch. She stood perfectly still, meeting their aggressive stares with steady composure. "What are you going to do about it, princess?" the largest man sneered. Elena's voice remained calm. "I'm asking you politely to leave these women alone." "Or what?" Another man laughed, standing up to tower over her small frame. The tension in the restaurant was suffocating. Everyone could feel violence about to explode, but nobody moved to help. Elena's friends tried to pull her back down. "Just ignore them, Elena. Let's leave." But Elena remained standing. Not because she wanted confrontation, but because she understood something the others didn't. Bullies only stop when someone refuses to back down. The men grew more aggressive, emboldened by the silence of other diners. They moved closer, surrounding Elena's table. "Sit down before we make you sit down," one threatened. Elena's response was quiet, but clear. "No." That single word hung in the air like a challenge. The restaurant staff watched nervously from behind the counter, unsure whether to call security or stay out of it. Other customers pretended to focus on their meals, but everyone was listening, waiting to see what would happen next. Elena stood there, a small woman facing 6 large, angry men, showing no fear despite being completely outnumbered. A young waiter would later recall, "I was shaking so badly I couldn't breathe. But I still remember her eyes. They weren't scared at all. They were just quietly watching them, like she knew exactly how this was going to end." The confrontation was reaching a breaking point. The men were getting angrier, more threatening. That's when everything changed. The restaurant owner, Victor Kane, 58 years old, tall, lean frame, gray hair, an old veteran who'd served in Iraq. Normally quiet, he usually stayed in the kitchen. Hearing the commotion, he stepped out. His eyes didn't look at the 6 troublemakers, they looked directly at Elena. He recognized that face, a fellow soldier he'd heard about in the field. The 6 men were shouting, preparing to escalate to violence. Victor slammed his hand hard on the bar, his voice thundering across the restaurant. "Enough! Do you people know who she is? She used to lead special forces. Anyone who touches her is asking for trouble." The entire room froze. 6 men fell completely silent. The sound of knives and forks stopped, leaving only thick silence. Elena said nothing, just stood there, her gaze cold and steady. Word spread quickly through the restaurant. She used to command special forces. That's impossible. But Victor wasn't finished. He walked closer to the troublemakers, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd seen real combat. Elena Ward. Captain Elena Ward. I served 2 tours in Afghanistan. I heard stories about her unit. The largest of the 6 men, who'd been most aggressive, suddenly looked uncertain. She led rescue operations in Helmand province, Victor continued, saved entire companies from Taliban ambushes. Elena remained silent, but her posture had shifted slightly. The gentlewoman who'd been helping restaurant staff had been replaced by someone with unmistakable military bearing. One of the troublemakers, himself a former soldier, started to recognize her. Ward, Captain Ward, Afghanistan, Helmand, you led the team that got us out of that ambush. His voice was barely a whisper. The other 5 men looked at their friend in confusion. What are you talking about? She saved our lives, the ex-soldier continued, his aggression completely gone. Our convoy was surrounded. No way out. Command sent her team to extract us. Victor nodded. That's right. She didn't need to prove anything here. I've seen grown soldiers salute her name on battlefield memorials. The atmosphere in the restaurant had completely transformed. What started as drunken harassment had become something else entirely. Other diners began speaking up. I read about her in military journals. She's the one who saved that battalion in Helmand. The 6 men began backing away, faces pale with realization. Elena finally spoke, her voice quiet but carrying complete authority. Tonight, nobody needs to be afraid. No police were called. No physical confrontation occurred. Silence and truth had crushed all arrogance. The troublemakers gathered their things and left without another word, too ashamed to meet anyone's eyes. The restaurant slowly returned to normal conversation, but with a new understanding of the quiet woman at the corner table. Elena sat back down with her friends, who looked at her with amazement and new respect. Elena, one friend whispered, you never told us. It's not something I talk about, Elena replied simply. I'm not that person anymore. But Victor Kane, still standing nearby, knew better. Ma'am, once a soldier, always a soldier. You just chose to serve in a different way. Elena looked up at him with gratitude. Thank you for speaking up. Thank you for your service, he replied. The evening continued peacefully, but everyone in the restaurant would remember this night, the night they learned that heroes often hide in plain sight. One of the 6 men, a former soldier himself, suddenly recognized Elena completely. He stammered, Ward, Captain Ward, Afghanistan, Helmand. You led our squad out of that ambush. His entire table went silent. A woman at a nearby table whispered, My God, she really used to command special forces. Victor Kane nodded, his voice dropping to a serious tone. That's right. She doesn't need to prove anything here. I've seen fellow soldiers bow their heads at memorials, with her name on them. Other patrons began speaking up. I read her name in military reports. She's the one who saved that entire battalion at Helmand. The 6 troublemakers stepped back, faces drained of color. But Elena's story was more complex than simple heroism. Victor continued, addressing the entire restaurant. Captain Ward didn't just lead troops. She led rescue missions into territory where other units couldn't go. The former soldier at the troublemakers' table was now trembling. Ma'am, Operation Desert Storm, 2018. You came for us when command said we were expendable. Elena's silence confirmed it. We were pinned down for 18 hours, he continued. Taliban on 3 sides. No air support available. Command wrote us off. Then your team appeared. The restaurant was completely silent now, everyone listening to this impromptu war story. She led a team of 12 operators through enemy territory to extract 23 soldiers, the man explained to his shocked companions, under fire, at night, with no backup. Victor added, that operation became classified, but word spreads in military circles. She saved lives when everyone else had given up. Elena finally spoke, her voice carrying quiet authority. That was my job, bringing people home. But there was more to the story. An older gentleman at another table stood up. Ma'am, if you're Elena Ward, then you're the reason my son came home from Afghanistan. All eyes turned to him. He was in that convoy ambush in Helmand province, 23 soldiers trapped, surrounded, running out of ammunition. He told me a female captain led the rescue team that saved them all. Elena looked at him with recognition. What's your son's name? Marcus Thompson. Sergeant Marcus Thompson. Elena smiled for the first time that evening. He's a good soldier. How is he? He's home. Married now, has 2 kids, thanks to you. The emotional weight of the moment settled over the restaurant, but the story wasn't finished. Victor explained to the still shocked troublemakers, after that operation, Captain Ward could have had any assignment she wanted. Promotion to major, comfortable desk job, training position. Instead, Elena said quietly, I requested discharge. I decided I'd seen enough combat. Why? Someone asked. Elena was quiet for a long moment. Because I realized that bringing people home from war was important, but preventing the need for war was more important. The restaurant understood. Elena had chosen to transition from military service to civilian life, but she'd never stopped serving others. So you became, Victor asked. A social worker, Elena replied. I work with veterans transitioning back to civilian life, help them find jobs, deal with trauma, reconnect with families. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The 6 men who'd been harassing women had just encountered someone who spent her civilian life helping former soldiers. The former soldier among the troublemakers stood up. Ma'am, we owe you an apology. Not just for tonight, but for everything. Elena looked at him seriously. You don't owe me anything. But you owe these women respect. You owe everyone in this restaurant respect. He nodded, thoroughly ashamed. Elena continued, if you're having trouble adjusting to civilian life, there are resources available. People who can help. Even in this confrontational moment, she was trying to help, rather than punish. The 6 men gathered their things and left, but not in anger. They left in shame, with a new understanding of the woman they'd tried to intimidate. As they walked out, the former soldier paused at Elena's table. Ma'am, thank you for saving us in Helmand, and thank you for trying to save us tonight, too. Elena nodded. Take care of yourself, soldier. The restaurant returned to normal, but with a new atmosphere of respect and quiet pride in having witnessed something extraordinary. From that day forward, those 6 men never dared show their faces when walking past the restaurant. Women in the town began walking more confidently. They knew someone had stood up for them. One late evening, Elena returned to the restaurant. Victor invited her to sit with him, bringing out 2 bowls of hot soup. Not much was said, just quiet warmth spreading between 2 veterans who understood service. Elena spoke softly. I never needed people to call me a hero. I just wanted the women in that room to be able to eat dinner peacefully, without being disrespected. Victor understood completely. You're still protecting people. Different mission. Same heart. Elena had found her new purpose, helping veterans transition to civilian life, working with families of deployed soldiers, advocating for better mental health resources. Her military service had ended, but her service to others continued in a different form. Do you miss it? Victor asked. The action, the importance of military operations? Elena considered this carefully. I miss my team. I miss the clarity of mission, but I don't miss the violence. What do you miss most? The feeling that what we were doing mattered, that we were making a difference. Victor smiled. You're still making a difference. Look around this room. Look at how people are treating each other now. He was right. The restaurant had a different atmosphere now. More respectful, more aware, more protective of vulnerable people. Elena had changed the culture of the entire establishment without trying to, just by being who she was when it mattered most. Young women would sometimes approach her table, not to ask about her military service, but to thank her for showing them what strength looked like. Ma'am, one college student said, seeing you stand up to those men. It taught me that I don't have to accept being treated badly. Elena smiled. You never did have to accept it. You just needed to see that someone would support you. The impact rippled beyond that single evening. The story spread through the town, creating a new standard for how people treated each other. Elena continued her quiet civilian life, but now with the knowledge that her example had inspired others to stand up for what was right. Sometimes the greatest victories aren't won on battlefields. Sometimes they're won in restaurants, in quiet moments when someone refuses to let injustice continue. Elena Ward had traded her military uniform for civilian clothes, but she'd never stopped being a protector. Some people walk through ordinary life like shadows, nobody knowing who they used to be. But in one crucial moment, truth emerges. They are the ones who carried darkness so we could live in peace. Elena Ward only wanted a quiet dinner, but an entire town changed because of her steady silence. Her story reminds us that heroes often choose ordinary lives after extraordinary service. They work regular jobs, live in normal neighborhoods, shop at the same stores we do. The veteran behind the grocery counter might have saved lives in combat zones. The quiet teacher might be a former intelligence officer. The social worker helping troubled families might be a decorated special forces captain. They don't seek recognition because they've already received the only recognition that matters, the knowledge that they served something greater than themselves. The next time you see someone performing quiet acts of service, remember Elena. Remember that extraordinary people often choose ordinary work because they understand that protecting others never really ends. True heroes don't retire from service. They just find new ways to serve. If you believe in quiet stories like this one, leave a comment. And don't forget to subscribe to SN Quiet Stories. We tell the stories that shouldn't be forgotten. Real people creating and telling stories, not mass-produced AI.